Full house 8.
Buti naman nandiyan na kayo. Alam ko naman lahat kayo na matagal ng sulat nito. At ang sulat na to ay pinadala sa atin ng initials na to.
Yun yan. Justin Bieber?
Tanga!
Nakakita ko na yan sa isang, hindi ko na matanda kung saan yan. Sa Mapua Institute of Technology.
Sige, bukas, mag-undercover tayo bilang mga estudyante doon. Dapat alamin natin kung sino itong JJB na to at ano tong pinadala niya sa atin, state law. Magkita-kita tayo bukas, meeting adjourn.
Ayan, boss.
Manang, ano po ba yung state law sa tingin nyo?
Teka muna, ano ba yan? Ano yan? Para ano ba yan?
Para sa project?
Wala namang...
Wala.
Hindi ko alam na. Ano ba yan?
Ano ba yung state law, Manong? Ha? State law.
State law?
Oo.
State law? Parang hindi ko alam yun.
Bakit?
State law?
Ano yung state law sa tingin nyo?
Parang hindi ko matandaan yun.
Law of state. Yun na lang, law of state.
Siguro yung...
Hindi ka, tourist na lang siguro.
Yung balat na pinap...
Kuya, ano po ba yung state law? Ano po ba yung state law?
Tanong mo kay Gayo, matalino yun.
Dayos, saka mo ka nito? Hindi ka ba yun? Oh, ano yung sabihin niya? Teka lang. Bakit dito? State law is the law of state. Yun lang, hindi ko rin kasi alam kung ano yung law yung sabihin. Mabuti ba? Mula na tayo sa ito na pera, mula sa mga gaya ko. So, teka, bakit hindi na yung pera?
Buti namin humingi ng tulong sa mga professional mula sa mga ahensya at pamahalaan upang maliwanagan kung ano ba talaga ang state law. Hinili namin ang Public Attorney's Office at ang Korte Suprema upang makakuha ng payan tungkol sa paksa.
I need to know that it is being enforced in one state or in one country.
It shows us the rights and obligations of each person or entity, whether natural or juridical. So, as Attorney Joseph said, it would cover people, and it also cover like corporations, partnerships, and other companies.
The Constitution. Which is the primary law of the land. The statutes, these are the laws which are enacted by the Congress. And of course, jurisprudence. These are the decisions made by the Supreme Court and well, the judiciary in general. And then there are the rules and regulations which also have the force and effect of law.
I think we should also include in state law all the international laws and conventions that a country signs or agrees into.
So, since we have different kinds of laws, therefore there would also be a hierarchy of the law. So, on top of that would be the Constitution, and then the statutes, or the ones created by Congress, would occupy the same status as that of treaties or international laws, customs, general principles of law, and then rules and regulations created by the executive department, as well as rules or doctrines created by judicial decisions would be on a lower plane compared to the other laws.
Well, primarily, I think as one law becomes state law if it is enforced and, how do you say, legislated, created by a country.
And how will you know if a particular state law is actually to be enforced or indicated or would bind you. Generally, laws, whether they come from judicial decision or government or the Congress, they always get published. They get published. So, meaning before it becomes binding to the people, they have to be published first, and then the people will be given the opportunity to look into these laws, and then there will be a time frame within which it will be effective. So that's how you know whether a law is to take effect.
State law essentially binds only the people or entities within the jurisdiction of the particular state, whereas international law is binding among countries. Essentially, that's the difference between the state law and an international law.
On the setup of US, because certainly US, United States of America, is made up of different states. So each state has its own law, but there is this umbrella or a federal law which is also being followed by all of those states. So essentially, that federal law is considered state law. A person actually subscribes to it, like he has freedom to believe or to follow those laws. But then for state law, when you're born in one jurisdiction, as they say, or in one state, in one country, you're already bound to follow those laws by virtue of your citizenship.
So, well, aside from that, even if you're not born in a particular country, but you go to that country, you are also bound by the law of the country that you sojourned or you visited.
For the bar exam, to just take it to the bars, and there are 8 subjects. Political law, laws governing the relationship between the state and the people, the government and the people. There's labor law and governs the relationship between employers and employees. There's civil law, laws governing interaction between people, individuals, corporations. Commercial law, these are laws which govern also people, corporation. However, they're more interested in the business side of our economy or society. There's taxation, laws governing the tax we pay our government. There's taxation. Criminal law, these are laws which punishes certain acts whenever committed by people. This entails punishment or a penal type of law. So it's very important. However, rules of court, remedial law, these are rules of procedure on how to apply our substantive laws. Criminal laws, labor laws, these are rules which governs how to apply them in administrative agencies or before the court. Although technically, it's not state law kasi hindi siya applicable sa buong Pilipinas. Or Manila, may sariling ordinance na applicable sa Manila. But however, kaya sinabi ko, ordinance is inferior to the laws enacted by Congress. So, ordinance na yan, applicable sa Manila, dapat, kumbaga, batay din siya sa isang existing na batas na. Hindi pwedeng against sa isang existing na law. If it's the Constitution, certain group of people draft it and the entire Philippines will ratify it through a plebiscite. For an ordinary law, the Congress would file a bill. It will pass through the process. When the Congress and the Senate approves the bill, they will send it to the President for approval or veto. So that's how a regular law becomes part of our state law.
There's still not really inconsistencies but variance in the bills authored by Congress and by the House of Representatives and the Senate. There will have to be a bicameral conference committee where they shall have to resolve the differences in the provisions of the bill, and only afterwards, if they will come to an agreement, then they will forward it to the president, to the executive, and the president will have to sign the bill. And then
If he agrees.
if yes, if the president agrees.
If not, then there's another whole process of evaluating and redrafting that law.
But of course, before the president signs the bill and make it into a law, it has also to be signed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, which represents the House of Representatives and the Senate President.
Ano-ano batas, yung bill na yan, may magpo-propose niyan. For example, let's go first with the Congress, a lower house. Somebody will propose it, it will pass through 3 readings. If it passes through 3 readings, it will be taken to the Senate. Also pass through 3 readings, if it will be approved by both houses, it will be passed to the president who can approve it or veto it. If it's approved, it becomes a law. If it is vetoed, it will not become a law. Of course, it's vetoed by the president now.
It has to be published in newspapers in general circulation so that people would know. Like, how could you bind a person to a law if they don't know? Kawawa naman sila, di ba?
There's a requirement of publication, notice to the people. So usually it's 15 days. A bill becomes a law even if it's approved by the president only after 15 days after its publication. There's a requirement of due process. Every law should be published first, so there can be a presumption that everybody knows the law. That's the reason why it's published. After the publication, after the 15 days pass, it will become part of our state.
The executive department, that is the task of that particular branch of government. Because as you know, we have 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judiciary. The judiciary would have to interpret the law, and it's the legislature which actually creates the law. And the executive department will be the one to enforce or implement the law. Particularly a statute.
It's called a statute.
That's a particular term that we call laws passed by Congress. It's a statute.
Para naman mas maintindihan ang pagpapatupad ng mga state law sa ating estado, binisita din namin ang NBI at ang PRC, kung saan ang NBI ay isa sa mga sangay ng gobyerno na nakatalaga sa pagpapatupad ng batas, at ang PRC naman ay ang nangangasiwa sa mga batas patungkol sa mga profesional.
Ang NBI, gaya nga sa kanyang pangalan, nagsisiyasat, ano? Pagka mayroong sumbong, complaint na ibinulog sa amin, inukusisya namin, titingnan namin kung yung kasong yun, sumbong na yun, nasa aangkop doon sa mandato ng NBI bilang isang crime investigator. Oo. Kasi sa pangalan nga ng ating ahensya, no? National Bureau of Investigation, pambansang kawanihan ng pagsisiyasat, no? Salin sa Tagalog. Yung buong bansa sakop ng NBI. Kasi isa nga ang isang ahensya na pagsisiyasat ng mga krimen ang NBI. Pero siya tatawag na civilian in character, no? And national in scope. So ang lawak ng kanyang kapangyarihan, ng kanyang otoridad, ng kanyang sakop sa pagsisiyasat, ay buong bansa. So nationwide, so national yun.
Religion is basically still covered by state laws with certain exemptions. For example, taxes. An established religion is exempt from paying taxes because of the principle of separation of church and state. The law is not exempting the church. It is the Constitution who is exempting the church. It means that at the end of the day, if there are certain exemptions for certain individuals under certain laws, it should be in accordance with the Constitution because at the end of the day, the law should apply to all. And exemptions are not favored.
Perhaps in our case in the Philippines, the exceptions would come, for example, from it's normally based on territory or religion. For example, in labor law, certain religious organizations are exempted from joining unions, and they cannot be forced by the union to actually join them, and that's allowed by the law. Or, for example, in territory, there are territories which would be exempt. For example, the autonomous regions, they would have their own separate laws. Or sometimes the combination of territory and religion, for example, the Muslims in the autonomous region of Mindanao, they have their own Sharia law, they have their own Sharia courts, and there is a conflict between, for example, the family law, general family law for the civil code, and family law for the Sharia law. They apply the Sharia law and don't apply the civil code.
That ignorance of the law excuses no one. So it is assumed, like as a citizen of country, you are supposed to follow laws, and you cannot excuse yourself and say that I didn't know, so you can't hold me responsible. That's not a valid excuse.
Exemptions are to be strictly construed. So, exemptions must be strictly stated in the law itself. So, if it was not specifically mentioned in the law that a particular group is not exempted, they cannot just presume that because of a particular religion or because it is against their beliefs that they're already exempted. It has to be specifically stated in the law to which they want to exempt themselves.
Naman, for engineers, may tinatawag tayong professional tax. You have to pay taxes dahil in-exercise mo profession. Meron yun professional tax. If I'm not mistaken, it's paid sa city kung saan ka nag-practice. O ako din. Diba meron yan sa engineer? Pag susulat mo, kung pipirma ka, di ba ilalagay mo pa may, aside from your number as an engineer, meron pa yung PTR Ano yan?
Hindi pa.
Di ba kayo naano ng gano'n? Sa mga abogado kasi yun ang requirement sa mga abogado. So, professional guy. Professional tax nila na kasi ito namin. Sa sa PRC, Professional Regulatory Commission, they have certain rules and they have certain laws that you should follow. Example, hindi ka pwedeng gamitin profession mo, gumawa ng sama, yun, or may certain standards. Ano ba ba? Hindi ako sigurado sa specific laws for engineers. Ano ba? EcE kayo, di ba?
Yes, sir.
Example yan is yung the standards ng mga NTC. Ano ba yung NTC, di ba may standards yan?
Meron po.
So, kailangan sundin yun. Kumbaga, ang laws ng Pilipinas, hindi naman niya strictly nire-regulate yung kada profession. They just establish guidelines for public interest, public safety. Kasi every professional, engineers, of course, yung profession is impressed with public interest. So, the state should have guidelines. At the end of the day, mayroong limited regulations para hindi kayo makasama. Isa na sa Congress. Pero yung mga specifics lang, meron naman mga engineering board sa PRC, mga ganun. Usually, sila na yung mga finance. Yung sa PRC yung mga nag-alas.
General law dyan ay Republic Act 8981. Ngayon, sa ibaba niyan ng Professional Regulation Commission ay mayroong 46 na regulatory boards. Kasama na dyan ng electronics engineering, certified public accountant, nursing, medicine, etc. Unang-una, yung ating mga batas, yan ay pinapublish sa newspaper, general circulation, kundi kaya sa official gazette. Ngayon, napapatupad yan ng ating bansa o ng PRC through the regulatory boards. Alam mo yung regulatory boards? Yun yung kupunan na tumatayong tagapagdala ng ating batas na yan. And then, in coordination with the accredited professional organization, yung kupunan ng mga sabihin na nating electronics engineer sa buong bansa.
Statutes are our main source of law here in the Philippines, which are the ones made by Congress. And for the statute, the primary limitation would be that the current Congress, which creates a statute, cannot restrict the future members of Congress from creating another law.
The limitation of state law is within the state itself. It's within its jurisdiction. A country cannot enforce its own laws as against another country, except when maybe a citizen of another country enters into our territory, our jurisdiction, and then that foreigner is subject to our laws.
And also, usually state laws are not supposed to contravene generally accepted principles of international law. So they have to be in harmony with these principles.
Last day. Pasta. Boss, ano pala?
Kamusta lahat? Ayos naman. Sige, tignan nga natin yung report nyo. Yan.
Ayon sa nakalap namin impormasyon, ang state law ay mga koleksyon ng mga batas na nakapase sa ating konstitusyon. Sakop nito ang mamamayan na naninirahan sa isang bansa, pati na rin ang mga dayuhan na pumupunta sa teritoryo nito.
Dito ulit sa Amerika, meron silang 50 states law. Sa Pilipinas, meron lamang tayong isang state law sapagkat isa lamang tayong estado.
Marami tayong batas na nakakaharap sa pang-araw-araw at ito ay nabibilang sa state law. Sapagkat ang state law ay binubuo ng mga batas na ginawa, ipinapatupad at ipinasa sa ating bansa. Ito ay ginagawa ng Legislative Department ng ating gobyerno at pinapatupad naman ng Executive Department ng ating gobyerno.
Ang mga batas pala sa ating estado ay dumadaan muna sa Kongreso, sa Senado at sa Presidente, kung saan ang Presidente ay maaaring ipatupad ito o i-veto. Ang kaunlaran ng ating bansa ay depende sa mga mamamayan nito. Ito ay ginagabayan ng mga batas ng ating estado. Ang bawat isa ay dapat magkaisa upang maprotektahan ang soberanya ng ating pinapangalagaan. Kung gayon, ang pag-unlad mo ay hindi weda-weda na.
Yun pala yung state law. Pero sino si JJB? Eh di ba nga si Justin Bieber nga yun? Eh sino yun? Siya yun!
Kasi ang introduction niya ay talaga
the